Hey, good evening, everyone. It is March 15th, 2022, and you are here with the Athens-Clarke County Mayor and Commission for the first time in City Hall in a couple of months for our monthly agenda-setting meeting. We have a couple opportunities for public input. There will be an opportunity for public input on the consent agenda, and then a separate opportunity on old and new business. At each of those opportunities, anyone here who wishes to comment at the podium will have 3 minutes to provide input. You're going to see a light on Clerk Spratlin's desk in front of me. It will be green when it's time to begin speaking, yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and red when those 3 minutes have expired. All right, to begin with, I'd like to direct Commissioners' attention to the consent agenda, and I would like to ask members of the Commission if there's any item they would like to remove from the consent agenda.
Number 4.
All right, Commissioner Myers would like to remove item number 4. Any others? All right, seeing none, any member of the public who is with us tonight, now is the time to speak to any remaining items on the consent agenda. Those are items 1, 2, 3, and 5. Any takers? All right, hearing none, we'll go to public input on old and new business. So those are items 4 and 6 through 18. Would anyone like to speak to any of those items, 4 or 6 through 18? All right, seeing none, we're going to move to commission discussion. All right, Commissioner Myers, you asked that we remove item 4. Would you like to provide any input on that item?
Well, I did only because I have a constituent who talks to me all the time about broadband, and I just wanted to clarify. In this case, on number 4, when I was reading that, it's a lease agreement for the wireless tower, and we'll put it back on consent. But I just wanted to clarify for my understanding for constituents, we're allowing these cell towers. Do we as a community have any way to communicate, or do we have any power over our broadband providers for the type of service, the quality of the service? And I know that's not it's just sort of like we give them the towers. Are there any avenues we have for saying, hey, we're giving you these tower spaces, the services that are being provided are not sufficient in the community?
And when you talk about coverage of the
right. So for example, I'm just using this as an example because I have constant questions about this on the east side, and
what we have learned is that these tower providers, they will construct another tower when it's driven by the market demand, and then poor coverage of an existing tower. So ultimately, I don't know if we could use this tower and say we could, if we said we're not going to let you place this tower, we're going to require you to remove your equipment or remove this tower unless you agree to build a new tower to provide better coverage in the area. I think the provider would choose, we can make that offer, that's the pleasure of the commission, but I think the provider would probably indicate to us that they'll go find another location on private property, and but I would doubt we'd have that much leverage.
Well, and it's also, the towers are governed by FCC regulations, so there's not a whole bunch of, now, I mean, we could negotiate anything. We could ask them for certain considerations, but it's pretty straightforward there.
so constituents who are concerned about broadband coverage, a better avenue for them to address concerns would be to do what government, state, federal?
I would say one thing, I've noted, so it's my understanding the state of Georgia has approved lots of funds to expand connectivity, internet connectivity to rural areas. So
Yeah, and beyond the funds that the state will be allocating, the federal government will be allocating directly $65 billion.
Yeah, I just am, I have this question often.
And that is one of our key
because even-
SPLOST. That's one of our SPLOST projects.
Right, because
too.
even on the, you know, I would imagine, I mean, I bring it up with this tower in particular because it's on the east side of town, and even in the neighborhood I moved into and along Cedar Shoals, the cell coverage is quite poor. So I just was trying to find out what the connection is, and if we, on a local level, so I can tell my constituent that, yes, we approve the cell towers, but we really have no power over the broadband providers. Is that accurate?
It's market-driven for the most
Okay.
part. That would be the only point of leverage we would have, is if we had something that they wanted.
Okay,
What we can do is ask, in this particular case, if they are upgrading or improving, you know, quality of service with this, that might be an added piece of information.
so maybe I can follow up with an email to you about that. Okay,
I think
thank
your
you.
question is, I don't think we have authority as a local government to require broadband providers to build towers.
And in this case, we're talking about cellular service provider rather than kind of two-home
Yeah.
broadband for cable or internet service. So,
Oh.
Commissioner Houle?
No, I was talking about data coverage, you know, as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to, this came up, a similar situation was on our agenda, I believe it was last month, maybe the month before. And just like to point people who are interested in getting nerdy about the money, that Facts and Issues 3 reveals yet again where our staff has more than doubled the amount we're going to get for this, as well as setting up a contract that gets us an increase year after year at 3%. So kudos to staff and GMA for helping us out with that.
Commissioner Davenport?
Just help my colleague next door. There's we approved a year ago, a cell tower through Verizon on Belmont Road. And it's gonna extend about 6 miles of coverage, of broadband coverage. When Verizon is gonna build that tower, I'm not sure, but it's coming and it's approved.
Yeah, I think all of us who travel are always amazed at how quickly you can drop coverage as you move kind of into more rural elements of the community. Manager Williams and then Commissioner Thornton.
Well, I'd say, Commissioner Myers, with constituents, that, of course, the SPLOST project, what the user group is looking at, and you've already approved the hiring of a consultant to help us think through how best to use those SPLOST funds to leverage public-private partnerships, perhaps, to extend coverage into those areas of the county that don't have coverage currently.
Well, what's concerning here, I think, for people is that this is not an area where people would think that there is not coverage, since it's down Cedar Shoals Drive, and for example, in the neighborhood I live in, which is, you know, a half a mile from Publix, I often only have one bar, you know, I don't have internet service there. So this is right sort of in the middle of suburban east side Athens. So, anyway.
Commissioner Thornton?
Then I thought maybe that'd be helpful. I'm sorry. With my meeting with Senator Warnock's assistant, we talked about broadband, but we were more talking about in the rural areas, so I expect something to drop around that. But when you say suburban, I don't know how that fits.
Right, it's sort of, I think it would be surprising to most people that down Cedar Shoals and
Yeah.
on Gaines School that the self-coverage is not that great.
Okay.
All right, and,
So Kelly, are you following up on the broadband conversation with Senator Warnock's office?
so I'll be looking for the federal distribution of those already allocated $65 billion and kind of the routes available there
Okay.
when they merge. All right, fine to put this back on consent?
Yes.
All right. All right, moving on to item 6 in old business, and we've had a couple discussions about this, given that the local paper managed from out of town didn't run the legal notice, so we had to delay a vote. This is the text amendment regarding the voluntary inclusionary zoning effort. So any further discussion? Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I'll be reaching out to Commissioners Denson and Parker to have a little discussion about some of the concerns that I'd raised. I mean, I'm greatly looking forward to this. It's something that's long overdue. There might be, a few questions that I have and maybe a need for tweaks. I do have concerns about offering these incentives in areas with overtaxed infrastructure already. And Commissioner Parker and I also shared some concerns. I have concerns about, the threat it could pose to historic neighborhoods, particularly those that are zoned RM, when their actual character is single family. So I'll be reaching out to Commissioners Parker and Denson to see if we can have a meeting of the minds on it.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Denson, and thank you for all your work on this. I know it was many months of very frequent meetings.
Well, thank you for tasking us to do it. It was I actually enjoyed the work. It was good. And the one to speak to the Commissioner Link's concern about the overtaxed infrastructure. One of the first things that Plan Director Brad Griffin gave to us is he actually did an overlap of the maps of these potential zoning areas where this could be applied. And then we actually did evaluate what the infrastructure capacity was for all those areas to make sure there wasn't any kind of capacity issues, in which the map showed that we did not see any capacity issues that we felt like the density increases that we're offering would have any kind of harmful effect. Now, of course, as we move to try to expand out the inclusionary zoning ordinance to be able to cover more things, I think that's possible, and that we'll have to keep track of that for any capacity issues. But I think this is also an important thing, which I know we've mentioned many times, but intentionally the way that this was written and drafted was to have something that can move forward with the intent that it would be revisited in a year, and then possibly again after that, just to actually be able for us to check in to see how effective it's being, and also, if there was any issues that arose that we did not foresee. So I think that's a good way for us to move forward, and then check in and be able to increase this and make it better. And also just for the public that's out there, because I know I got a lot of questions on just like what is inclusionary housing, what is inclusionary zoning. Just really basically what this policy is going to do is offer up to 3 incentives, density bonuses so that they can build more units. Be able to waive or to decrease the amount of required parking if the housing is built near a public transit stop. And the last one for downtown only, that they can actually have a smaller amount of square footage required for ground floor retail, and that's only for the downtown. And in return, of course, we can get up somewhere between 5 and 15% of the units that were built to be specifically built for folks who are either at 60% of the area median income or lower, or 80% of the area median income or lower. Again, this is like our starting point, so I think that I wouldn't be surprised if in a year or 2 years we revisit this and kind of tweak it and make it a little bit more better.
I've got Commissioner Hamby.
Sure. Just real quick, I heard Commissioner Denson mention a map of sorts. Can staff send us that map you're referring to?
We will.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Houle.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm really excited to see this coming forward. I'm excited to support it. When we're thinking a year out about revisiting this, in addition to the obvious, like seeing how well the ratios are working, 2 things I'd like for us to have in mind is one, I know a concern I've heard Commissioner Parker raise up about the payment in lieu option being extended to other zones. And then the other is, I kind of have this concern about the parking waiver carrot. It seems to me like development that's happening near transit stops maybe should just have a default lower parking requirement to drive up transit use and try to get away from individual auto-centric design. So I guess that's just something I'd like us to be thinking about too, not before we vote on this in April, but in the revisiting in a year. Thanks.
And certainly that's something that may be a future assignment to the Planning Commission broadly. I think a lot of people agree that those ratios are something worth looking at in more walkable, more transit-oriented areas. So, Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I presume that overlay map has to do with sewer capacity. My big concern is transportation capacity and areas that are zoned RM that were actually, small, quaint, single-family neighborhoods originally, and I'm more concerned about the street capacity and areas that might have substandard roads. And I'm wondering, I'll be asking Commissioners Parker and Denson about those particular areas. where you have narrow roads with no sidewalks in neighborhoods where there's no potential for sidewalks, where you might end up with a very dense development that could have a severe impact on the surrounding, what were single-family homes. A lot of times you have those pockets of RM right up against single-family.
Commissioner Denson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And just one clarification on the payment in lieu and why the committee came to the conclusion of, and which, of course, Commissioner Parker did have a different opinion that she definitely brought up. But the main reason that we came across this, the limit to the payment in lieu just to the downtown, is that, downtown, commercial downtown definitely is going to have scenarios where it's maybe not the most appropriate for us to have student housing, 85% of this building be student housing, and then 15% be families and maybe with children and stuff like that. So that makes sense that we might want to have. And also we see that the payment in lieu coming through on a commercial downtown could be sizable to a point that it could be a pretty large investment that could be used pretty quickly for something else. When it comes to these other areas, the other commercial general, the other RSs and stuff that this is going to apply to, those payment in lieus would not be sizable enough for actually to have its own project. We'd have to wait years for enough payment in lieus to come around that we had enough money to be able to do something with it, and therefore putting off having affordable housing being built for years. While if we do it this way without having the payment in lieu in those other areas, we will see, if a developer takes advantage of this, we will see affordable housing built, 12, 18 months out whenever they take advantage of this. And I think we're all very aware that the need for affordable housing is not something we can put off and wait for 5 years or 6 years for it to start. It's going to start compounding, honestly, as we've seen happening. So I think it's very important that, I think this is actually a nice middle ground where we recognize that in the downtown, payment in lieu does make a lot of sense. But otherwise, we just need the housing built fast. And the fastest way to do it is to have developers who are already building housing build the affordable housing for us. So.
Thanks. One interesting note in conversations with a couple of members of even the student development community, they've indicated recognition that there is really sizable portion of the UGA undergrad community, about 20% of undergrads are on Pell Grants and are, fully self-sustaining adults. And so I think they see the viability of inclusionary units even for that population in some cases, but potentially not all. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this rolls. But again, this is an enormous step forward for us in terms of availability of new resources in the community. So thanks again, everyone. Item 7 is by title only right now. This is an agreement with regard to payment in lieu of taxes with the Housing Authority for the North Downtown Athens Development Project. Members of the public who might be seeing this may know that the Housing Authority provides us with a payment in lieu annually for their whole array of projects. And given that this is going to be a very unique project with kind of 3 tiers of income levels, that a unique formula had to be devised for how the fund would be provided to the unified government for this property for the next 15 years. Manager Williams, do you want to provide any details about that?
Sure. And I want to also recognize Attorney Drake for his help in this matter as well. So I'm sorry that you don't have the agenda item yet. We're still working with the Housing Authority and their partner, Columbia Residential, as well as their attorneys. Ultimately, this will be an intergovernmental agreement with the Housing Authority. Really 3 points to consider. One is the pilot payment. So that would be the payment in lieu of taxes for phase 1 of Bethel. This is only affects phase 1, which is currently under construction. The second would be a ground lease, Attorney Drake, and there's an appraisal that backs that up, and we're trying to negotiate that. And the third item would be if there was any reimbursement to SPLOST because of private interest in that. And those are the 3 issues that we're working through with the Housing Authority right now. Attorney Drake, I don't know if you care to add to that.
I think you actually reflected what we're trying to get finalized before we bring the item to the commission for approval.
Any questions about that? All right. Moving on to new business. Item 8 is a change order for TSPLOST 2018 project number 6, the Firefly Trail, and this is the Trail Creek Crossing project. So if you were to stand on the overlook adjacent to what was formerly the Murmur Trestle, either in Dudley Park or just across Peter Street, you would see the very active work underway. And as everybody knows, when you get into doing blasting and work near granite, there oftentimes have to be pivots that happen mid-project. And this change order is covered by the contingency within the project. So any questions about this one?
Consent.
Consent.
Everybody okay with this on consent?
Yes, sir.
All right. It is a winning evening, my friends. Good. All right, moving on to number 9. Similarly, there's a change order regarding the new segment of the Greenway under construction right now adjacent to the Oconee Hill Cemetery.
Consent.
Let's see. And yes, we have a contractor, so everybody okay with this moving to consent?
Yes, sir.
All right. Consent. All right. Number 10, this regards a different segment of the Firefly Trail than we were just speaking about, sort of further up Spring Valley Road, and some right-of-way acquisition eminent domain resolution required, given that some of these parcels are in multiple ownership and there's inability for staff to find the owner. These are what sometimes attorneys call friendly condemnation. We don't have any adversarial condemnation contemplated here in this cluster. So, questions about this one?
Consent.
Consent?
I think I'd just like to leave this on so that you can make that same statement so that people don't freak out too much about the eminent domain and understand it.
Okay, I'd be glad to repeat the tape
Yeah,
on the first Tuesday of April.
yeah.
All right, we are moving on to yet another segment of the Firefly Trail with item number 11, and this is going to be a joint-use parking lot at our Streets and Drainage Building and a crossing. If I know most, if not all of you, have been out to this segment of Firefly. It's a fantastic segment. It's adjacent to the Hallmark Trailer Park, where there are literally hundreds of children, and this will provide them safe crossing to the trail.
Consent.
Oh.
Consent.
I wanted to see, I think I had mentioned to Manager Williams to look into the safety with that crossing from the parking lot. And I don't know, I didn't have time to review the report on this and to see if there were any update from Transportation Public Works about that mid-block crossing and how to make that as safe as possible, since that's on a pretty busy road.
Yes, thank you. And you had some suggestions about, protected median type thing, and I'm looking into that with staff right now.
Okay, so could we leave that off?
All right. Any further questions about this one? All right, we are moving on to 12, which is professional design and construction administration services for the East Side Library project from SPLOST 2020, which I know we're all very excited about. And regular viewers will remember that as we tiered the SPLOST 2020 program, one of the things we did is front load, among other projects, the East Side Library, recognizing how important that's going to be to community benefit and stability. And so we now have professional design and construction administration services ready to roll. So questions about this? Commissioner Houle?
I anticipate supporting this, but I would request that we keep it off consent just because the amount is still TBD. So, even though we've identified the contractor.
Yep. All right.
Yeah.
Further questions? All right. Moving on to item 13. This is replacement of a sewer main at State Route 10, the North Loop, right by the bridge over the river. And this is authorization for the utility contract item agreement. I'm scrolling down to see if we have a bid on this yet. And we do not. So questions about this item? We'll leave it off consent just because we don't have the bids in yet. All right, 14 is something that we saw in the work session a week ago, our fiscal year 23 University of Georgia / Athens-Clarke County Unified Government Transportation Agreement, where we manage the funds that come through the Small Transportation Intensive Communities Grant. And this, of course, will include a new route that will traverse North Avenue and Prince Avenue. Commissioner Link?
I'd be happy to see this on consent primarily because I feel like with Athens-Clarke County taking over this route and with an increased frequency, it'll benefit the entire community. UGA's kind of spotty schedule throughout the year kind of let people hanging as far as transit went along that Prince Avenue Health Sciences route. So I'd like to see this go on consent.
Everybody okay with this on consent? Okay, all right. Jean, item number 14 on consent.
If I may, Mayor.
Yeah, Commissioner Houle?
I feel like we can't overstate enough how much work it took to negotiate this with UGA, so kudos to staff again for that. I mean, this is no small feat to get this item on consent, so.
All right, good job, staff. Thank you. All right, moving on to 15. This is one of these recurrent requests that we have for Public Utilities Policy Procedure WS-11 regarding access for water or sewer at a lot that's one lot removed from the street frontage, and this is 550 Greencrest Drive in not only Commissioner Myers' district, but her neighborhood. So,
That's right.
Commissioner, any comments on this item?
No, I'm fine with moving this to consent. I did want to point out something, and maybe even ask staff something as well. This is a situation, again, that, it's sort of like the broadband service. So we think of that as something as down in the rural areas and not in the more populated neighborhoods. And Green Acres and also the other neighborhood that's right across from the fire station on the east side are all on septic. I went and reviewed that map again, and there's probably 250, 300 homes that are on septic there. And so this is a surprise to a lot of people to learn this. And I did talk to the homeowner here, and one of the things the homeowner said to me was that they were not told they were on septic when they bought the house. And I'm not sure, I mean, I knew, I literally lived down the street and just bought a house and knew there was septic there because it was shared with me. But I looked on the Q Public, and there's a lot of other information, but Q Public doesn't seem to have whether or not something's on city sewer or on the septic. Do we have that, is that recorded on public documents for people, homeowners to be aware of when they're buying a home? If it isn't, I assume it should be revealed.
Well, typically there's disclosures that are, if someone goes through a licensed real estate agent, that, that type of thing's supposed to be disclosed on there.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a little surprised. I don't really know what happened when the person bought the house, but I was also a little surprised when I went on Q Public and I didn't see that there. But anyway, I'm fine with moving this here, but it's a good opportunity to remind us that there's a lot of people who live in very populated areas that are still on septic. This house in particular, the septic system is not working and the fields are not able to be managed, and that's why they have to go this route. They'd be much happier not to go this route and avoid the cost, but there's no room to fix that septic situation. Anyway, on consent.
Thanks. Manager Williams, I'm testing my memory. I know I've seen, obviously, the map that's on our Public Utilities website of all the sewer lines and water lines, and I know I've seen a map of all of the septic tanks that are identified. Is that also on the Public Utilities
Yes.
site, or did we receive that via PDF at one point?
Well, I looked at it today. That's
It's on
where
the Public
it's on the
Utilities site.
same place.
So, yeah, members of the public, if you're looking for that,
Yeah.
you can kind of see that and overlay it with the property map. Commissioner Thornton?
So then I'm going to bring up another subject that I just need clarification since Commissioner Myers has brought that. Did we install water lines in that North Avenue area, but they're not hooked up?
So generally, when we did the SPLOST-funded water line extensions, we extended them to be accessible to every parcel, but then it was the determination of the parcel owner whether or not they wanted to connect those.
The residents were responsible for that then?
Correct. Is
Okay.
that generally the case, Manager Williams?
Yes, that's right. So there's water lines on virtually all the public roads in Athens-Clarke County, but they're not necessarily hooked up to every residence.
Okay.
I
So
do,
that is, say that again?
There's water lines, but not sewer lines.
Okay.
right. There's
Okay.
more water line than there is sewer line right now.
Okay, so I'm struggling with septic tanks in my district too, that's the reason.
Sure.
I'm asking.
Right, so, and just to maybe lead you a little bit on that, so typically, we're responsible for getting the water lines, sewer lines in the right of way, and then it's up to the homeowner to connect to it, and there's a connection fee, and they have to pay a plumber, that type of thing. You can use CDBG funds if it's low to mod, I think, to connect folks to the water and sewer systems. That's something you may want to think about in the future. But typically, that's done at the expense of the homeowner.
CDBG.
Any questions about this? Okay, everybody moving this to consent?
Consent.
All right, it's done. All right, 16, close to Commissioner Wright's heart, declaring the former Cooperative Extension Office as surplus and approving staff to begin the process of receiving bids.
Consent, please.
Yes, I'll go with you.
Consent?
Yes.
All right.
I have a quick question.
Yes, Commissioner Link?
Did we have some discussion about any funding that's generated from the sale of this property going into land bank for affordable housing and homelessness needs? Do we?
Would folks wish to see proceeds from this go into our affordable housing fund?
I would like that.
I mean, I agreed with it when it came up, but we didn't make a decision. So I don't have no problem with it, but still, is that a,
That'd be a commission-defined option.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
so-
I'm saying, so going on consent would not stop your recommendation?
Well, yeah, leave it off.
Okay.
I'd like to come up with a CDO that
Okay.
allocates that.
Yeah, the current agenda item simply says you can either rededicate them back to SPLOST 2011 as was discussed before, or allocate the funds to the general fund or for other uses. So we would need a CDO if you want a specific outcome.
Okay. Yeah, that was the point I was trying to make, Commissioner Lane.
Commissioner Houle?
Yeah, kind of along the lines of what Commissioner Link was bringing up. I guess I just wanted to clarify. So the way this agenda item is written, we put this out for sale, and then whoever the highest bidder is, we just sell it straight up, right? There's no conditions that can be put on the sale, and we basically have to agree to whoever gives us the highest bid. Is that
That's the way it's
correct?
currently worded,
Mhm.
yes.
Okay.
Commissioner.
Commissioner
I'll just say something real quick. I don't disagree with whatever the CDO probably would be, but I would caution, we just put, what was it, 11 million into an affordable housing from the ARP money to help with that. We don't know what sort of SPLOST projects from 2000, I know the cost of buildings, there's some other expenses that this could possibly go towards. I wouldn't be saying this if we hadn't already just put the 11 million into affordable housing.
And
So-
I'm going to be kind of naming an advisory group for occupancy of the cost of building. And so, of course, we talked about recently at the work session, given the funds that we know we have in SPLOST 2011, that's kind of going to see the budget busted just really for the building envelope and the core systems, without dollars for interior build out. So y'all just may want to contemplate for a couple of weeks
Right.
if you would want it
Maybe.
put back into 2011.
Maybe let's sell it first and see where, and then make a decision on.
Commissioner
where-
Thornton?
Yeah, and that was my thought. Do we have to make a decision how we want the money to go right now? Or are we just putting it on following consent? Is it something later that we don't have to tie ourselves down to next month?
Manager Williams, would you recommend any approach if we wanted some flexibility with use of these funds?
Well, the agenda item as written does not allocate those funds, so you could always come back later and do that. This was just putting it up for sale, seeing what comes in, authorizing us to put it out there and declaring it a surplus. So, Mayor Gertz, I may not understand your question.
No, that was
Would
it.
you need some direction at the vote first Tuesday, April? Or could you receive that direction later on after the sale?
We could receive the direction after sale.
Okay.
I do want to say, though, that Commissioner Hamby brings up a good point. I did want to build on what you said. As far as the tenant fit out, the building out, the inside of the building, the partitions, the furnitures, fixtures, and equipment could be as much as $1 million, and we currently don't have that in 2011 for Costa.
Commissioner Houle? I'm sorry, go ahead, Myers, and then I'll return to Houle.
This is just a quick question. By default, would the money from the sale go into the general funds?
By default,
Like if
yes.
we made no other motion?
That's right. We can hold it to the side, that.
And we'd have a second agenda item to accept the bid of the property, right? So y'all are going to have an opportunity to do this later in a
Okay.
different agenda item, so.
Thanks for that point, Josh. Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Williams, I did that. I called you Commissioner. I thought we were over that. Manager Williams, where did you have what you just read? You just read that it was a designation in here. Here we go. On 6.
There's no designation for the funds.
Accept the bid, they will have the option to rededicate. So maybe we just strike out that hint of where it's going.
Well,
As a commission-defined option, which leaves it more
Well,
flexible.
Broaden it.
to
Or
Assistant Manager Edwards' point, in 6, that last, or second to last sentence, if the mayor and commission accept the high bid for the sale, so there is a
Okay.
future action forthcoming that you'll have to vote on, and at that point, you can say, and I think Kelly, or Mayor, that's what you were asking.
That's
Like,
right.
is there a better way to handle this? And yes, there is. You could deal with that at the next juncture.
So there will be another stop on this train.
Okay, so does that clarify it enough to be on consent or not?
I'd like to leave it off.
Okay.
I'd like to explore the option of the CDO that either narrows that or
Broadens
broadens
it,
that, so there is some direction, because it could be a couple years down the line before this
Right.
action
And
is
then, and then the
purchased.
point being, when it comes to accepting the bid, that would be, as we're thinking about it, an opportunity to designate.
Yes.
But I do agree broadening it now. Okay. Thanks.
Commissioner Houle, is everything covered?
Just about, I think I was just going to ask, I mean, I just heard a couple years mentioned, but is there an anticipated timeline from when we'll be?
It's what the market bears, so, as soon as there's an offer on it, well, no, let me take that back. So there'll be a bid situation, and so it'll be put out for a certain amount of time. There's this process that governs that. We'll take the bids, and, the high bid would be so there'll be, this won't take years. There'll be a defined time period, which we can give you some more information on.
Okay, yeah, I guess that would be helpful to know the defined time period of the bid, when that closes, and, yeah.
All right, thanks for that, everyone. All right, 17 is an FY22 Homeland Security Grant Program application to acquire a new mobile 911 center for disaster management. Any questions about this item?
Quick question.
Yeah,
Quick
Commissioner
question
Denson?
to staff, and I, sometimes it's in here, but, so I know it says that the current one that we have currently is approaching, it's anticipated to end its service life pretty soon. Is that something where the old one we're going to be able to sell off or auction off, be able to get any kind of decent value back on it, or?
I don't know what the fair market value of it would be. I mean, it's basically a big RV,
Okay,
and it's pretty old.
so probably not much.
What we would do, I would think, is you declare it surplus and sell it on Gov Deals auction. And I guess we never really get what we hope, on Gov Deals, so.
Yeah.
I would think it'd be nominal value, but we can ask.
No, if it's something
Central
not,
Services on that.
yeah.
The listening public, this too could be your vacation home.
We're 911 center.
All right, any further input on that? All right, Manager Williams, of course, number 18 is by title only. Can you just give the commission a very brief, and the public, very brief note of what the highly descriptive 5339 application is?
Yes. So this is to take advantage, make sure we didn't cover that. I don't have it in my agenda pack I downloaded earlier. So this is the HB 81 $1 million. So this is some funds that were set aside by the state of Georgia for Athens-Clarke County for us to capture. The $1 million will be used to leverage Federal Transit Authority 5339 program funds in the amount of $4 million. And the intent is to use that together, $5 million, as phase one of a replacement transit maintenance facility. So the $1 million that's before you now has a fuse on it. We need to go ahead and act in order to capture the funds, and staff recommends that we do so.
Thank you for that, Manager Williams. And I did see in a staff report that our first delivery of some electric buses that are on order now are coming first quarter of next calendar year. So we definitely will need some upgraded facilities. All right.
And Mayor, I'm just.
Yes.
Did we put item 17 on consent? I wasn't sure if we actually did that. I was asking that question, but I was
Oh.
fine with going on consent.
Everybody okay with 17 on consent?
Yes.
All right. Gene, 17 is on consent. All right, so at 6:42, and I believe Attorney Drake, you asked us for adjournment of these agenda-setting sessions. Was that a protocol that you were recommending? All right, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
All right.
Second.
Sorry, Manager Williams, did you have something before we adjourn?
Yes, boy, I like the way this is moving. Now, I did want to say that, Mayor, I was going to talk to you that with the food bank, we understand that there may be some amendments that need to be made for a language access plan. These are formalities that are required for the CDBG CV funds that you recently accepted on behalf of the food bank for their expansion. So we'll be working on that. I just wanted to let y'all be aware. We'll give you plenty more information in the follow-up.
The food bank project, the local government version of the endless special editions of Star Wars reissues, where we get some new bonus material every time. All right. Yes, Manager
I'm
Williams?
sorry, and this is it, I promise. So we've had a baler fail at the MRF, and that's the machine that bundles up and straps all the material. So it looks like we're going to need to make an emergency purchase so that we do not have to landfill any recyclables. We have, limited storage potential there. Staff's already working on it. I want to give you a heads up. And there may be a agenda item to ratify that emergency purchase, and we're trying to identify the sources of funding that we're going to use.
All right.
Assistant Manager Edwards has been working that hard. Anything you care to add to that?
No, we just wanted to give you all the heads up in advance because it'll probably be on the agenda come April.
All right. Two likely additional items. So we had a motion from Commissioner Edwards to adjourn, second from
Carol.
Second from Commissioner Myers. All in favor? Aye. All right, at 6:44, just over 2 minutes per agenda item tonight. Good job, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.